Freeholder Desiderio is arriving shortly, and Sheriff Gary Schaefer is here. I believe he's back over there, still here. And Prosecutor Robert Taylor is here on behalf of Lincoln County. So at this time, I'm going to ask Freeholder Vice Director to say a few words. Ralph Sheets.
Thank you, Director. So good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We want to thank you for attending this forum. We think it's important. Through the years, you never know when you're going to have the big hurricane or what's going to happen to us. So the last 4 years, we've been thinking it's most important that we do sponsor such a program. And we're proud to have sponsored this. Now, this coming September, is National Preparedness Month. And I think it's pretty unique to hold this forum at this particular time. We must always be prepared for things that will happen. And I think most of you know, most of our bad storms are northeast storms. And we never really experienced this type of a storm. They tell me that through the history we may have had one. Well, I'm not so sure, because everything I've seen in my life here have been northeast storms. But the thing of it is being prepared and being ready. You can always notch down, but you have to notch up for that preparation and be prepared. So it gives us great honor and privilege to have these gentlemen here today as our speakers for this forum to bring information to you, which we know that you'll find it to be of great interest. And the fact that you're here, the fact that I see the amount of you here, I see the interest. And we are very happy as the board here to bring this program to you. So having said that, Director, I think we'll go. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
All the speakers today may have other commitments after they get done speaking, so they may not be able to stay for the length of the program or until the end of the program. So as we go through the program, generally we're going to call each one in the order that they're stated on the agenda to speak. At the end of their comments, we're going to ask if any member of the audience has any questions. And if you have a question, I'll call upon you, and if you can, we'd like to have your name and address so we know who you are and where you're from. And if you would ask a question to gain information, that is the purpose of the interaction period. If you have a public opinion, if you have an editorial, you have an axe to grind, you're going to be rolled out of order because all the people here are here to provide information, and we're here to work together to better inform, I think, the people of Cape May County. If you have any other comments, if you want to see the people after the conclusion of today's conference, that's fine. If they have the ability to stay and talk to you, or you can call them later, contact their offices, and they'd be glad to assist you with any other specifics they have. But we'd like to move this along and get this done in a timely manner, at the same time making it informative and educational. So at this time, talk about the Coastal Evacuation Task Force legislation and how to enhance emergency management. We have our state senator, Dr. Jeff Van Drew, here, and our former freeholder, so very aware of what's going on in Cape May County. So at this time, we'd like to welcome Dr. Jeff Van Drew.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be with all of you again. And first of all, let me thank the freeholders for having this each and every year. It is obviously very important. And we were speaking up here a little while ago about, the most critical issues in the state of New Jersey. And in all honesty, we can discuss, and we very often do discuss in state and federal government, many tangential issues that perhaps aren't as important as those that are most essential, which are the health, safety, and welfare of our people, and quite frankly, our financial security. And we're not going to discuss financial security today, because that's probably the only thing that's more challenging than a hurricane, to be honest with you. But we are going to discuss some of the issues that relate to public safety and relate to hurricane preparedness and evacuation. And just to touch base a little bit, I'm going to start on one issue that I know is near and dear, and I want to thank the freeholders and the county government for doing so much with it, which is the Beasley's Point Bridge. Very briefly, this has been discussed. You know, I had no gray hair when this whole thing started, and if you look now, I definitely am getting some. So it's been a long time in the works, but it is moving forward. Folks have discussed back and forth if it is or isn't necessary. Of course, as you know, we are moving forward, and the ownership now has been transferred over to the county of Cape Mayo after some very long and difficult discussions and deliberations, and the county was involved and very proactive. And I'd like to thank my friend Stephen O'Connor as well, the administrator, for the work that he did on that issue. And I think you're going to hear much more about that. But the most important part, why is it necessary? Because in honesty, for those that understand an evacuation in Cape May County, you're going to hear it over and over again, very important statistics. 6th most vulnerable place in the United States of America. Other than Louisiana and southern Florida, Cape May County is extremely vulnerable. We have to be able to get people out in a timely way. And everybody is going to be going north and west to remove themselves from this county. There's only one group of folks that are going to be coming into this county during this process. Does anybody know who they are? I'm sure you do. Emergency personnel, troops, National Guard, all types of emergency personnel. They're the ones that are going to be coming in. How are they going to come in, especially earlier on in the process? Route 9. Everybody will be going north and west on 47 and 55, north and west on the Garden State Parkway, on the Turnpike, on the Atlantic City Expressway. The one way that they will be coming in is State Highway number 9. That's why it cannot be discontiguous in Cape May County or in southern New Jersey, and we do need to have that open. There's a whole bunch of other reasons. I'm not even going to go into those. That reason alone is enough to make sure that that highway is open. It's one issue that I wanted to touch base upon again because you hear it often. You might have seen, interestingly enough, on the front page of the newspaper today, there was discussion about sheltering. It was in the front page of the paper, and animals. And some folks say, you know, again, speaking about tangential issues, there's some folks that, quite frankly, aren't as concerned about pets and animals as others are. I am. I love my German Shepherds. I'm not leaving without them. They're going with me. But there are some folks that aren't as concerned. So they say, why are we even thinking about this? Why is it a big deal? You have to understand that part of the process, part of the problem, there are experts that know much more than I do here about this, will tell you that in order to get people out, you have to instill confidence that, number one, the storm is really coming, that it's necessary for them to leave, that the proper science is there. You also must make sure that they are leaving with everyone that they love. Obviously, they're going to leave with their children and their families, their grandparents and parents, hopefully. However, there's the problem with pets, and many folks have pets. Most especially, senior citizens will not leave without their dog or their cat. They're not doing it. Many of them are not going to leave. They found this out in Louisiana. They have found it out in other areas where there have been severe storms, that there has to be some sort of a methodology for them to bring the animals or to shelter the animals. And one issue we have been working on with the Humane Society in Atlantic County and in Cape May County, and with actually statewide, is sheltering, animal sheltering. It came up during our evacuation task force hearings. We don't still have a good enough way to deal with sheltering all the animals. And I'm just going to emphasize again, it really, whether you think that's an important issue or not, because some folks do and some folks don't, it is important because it also deals with the sheltering of human beings, because some of these folks will not leave without their animals. So the good news is that's moving forward to some degree, and you might have seen that the Atlantic City racetrack, where they have the Hamilton Wall, that is one of the highest and driest areas in the entire region, and they've been kind enough at the racetrack. Maureen Bugden and some of the folks there, she's the executive director there. We've put people together with the Humane Society, working with Atlantic County and Cape May County, and actually regionally, even Cumberland County, to say that that would be an appropriate spot to shelter these animals. And that process is moving forward, which is good news. It was one of the points of the task force that we need to do more on that statewide. Other issues that we found out, and by the way, all of what I'm discussing is in the form of legislation. And interestingly enough, I believe it's of primary importance to get this legislation passed. It's moved and it's stopped, and it's moved and it's stopped, which is not an unusual process in state or federal government. Sometimes those issues that are the most important or seem to be the most obvious as far as common sense that they should be done and get done often don't. It takes a long time. I always, again, harken back to the days of totally different issue, but telemarketers, and for years people said they wanted a no-call list in New Jersey. It took years and years before we established a statewide no-call list for people to go on for telemarketing. Common sense should have happened I would think within 6 months it should have been done. It took years. This legislation may take a little while too, because some of it has fiscal notes attached to it, and some of it is just not controversial, but slightly more difficult in bringing all the agencies together. But I do believe we're going to get it done. In all honesty, it may not be in this legislative session because we just have the lame duck left, so we may have to reintroduce all of it next year. And I am committed, as are my Assemblyman Albano and Assemblyman Milam, that we are going to reintroduce this legislation. If it doesn't get done in lame duck, you have to be persistent with this stuff. And the reason you do is because it deals with important issues. For example, we're spending billions of dollars building schools in the state of New Jersey, and yet the schools are not all shelter compatible. That doesn't make sense to me. The schools are not all compatible for the emergency generation of electricity if needed. That doesn't make sense to me. I think that it has to be mandated by state law that all these new buildings could be used for shelters. We are extremely short of shelters. We need more shelters. It is a big issue, and if we're building new buildings and we're using public funds, we should ensure that they could be used for sheltering. Common sense. It doesn't seem to be all that difficult or controversial. Another part of the legislation, hospitals and nursing homes, they all have their own evacuation plans. They have to by law, and they have good plans, but there was a frequent discussion when we had these meetings of coordinating among the nursing homes and hospitals. In other words, they're doing a fine job. They have their plan, but how is it all going to relate together? Because you're going to have, especially if we're having a real big storm, and again, ladies and gentlemen, Freeholder Sheets was exactly right. We just haven't had one, thank God. But if we had a real Category 3 storm in the state of New Jersey, for Cape May County would be totally underwater. People must understand that. Not the Barrier Islands. It's not gonna, the Barrier Islands certainly are going to be underwater, but when you say that, people always think, oh, Sea Isle is going to be underwater, and Stone Harbor and Avalon. No. Route 9, Middle Township, Upper Township, Dennis Township, Lower Township, all the mainland communities. This water is going to extend from bay to ocean across the county. We are extremely vulnerable. We are going to have to get people out. And for that reason, these issues that we're bringing up are paramount, and sheltering is so important because in a real Category 3 storm, a lot of the sheltering, there's going to be some sheltering, there's going to need to be some sheltering in Cape May County and Atlantic County, but you're going to need sheltering that is much farther out, because in a real storm, places like Cumberland County are going to have very major issues as well. And these folks may discuss that a little later. So we need to do more with the sheltering. I want to thank everybody, the state police, the prosecutor, the freeholder board, for the reverse lane work that's been done. Very important. It does make sense. We have to have everybody moving north and west. And we're still going to have extreme difficulty if it is during the height of the season getting people out of this county. Folks ask me all the time, if there's a real storm, what should we do? 2 words, get out. Get out when you're told to get out. Listen to the experts on this. Listen to the authorities. It's serious business. You're going to need to do it. The reverse lanes help. And I know a little bit controversial, but the more that you look at it, again, just like the Beasley's Point Bridge issue, the Route 55 issue does matter for a host of reasons. And we can talk about the financial reasons and the economic reasons, what it means to the county. We can talk about the traffic safety and the transportation reasons, but also the evacuation reasons. 47 is going to be like a parking lot. In fact, there are some studies that show it's not going to be even all that effective with the reverse lane strategy. So we really do need to look at this issue. And I'm here to tell you that there is renewed vigor, very renewed vigor, and renewed interest in looking at it in a whole different way through the South Jersey Transportation Authority, which are the folks that have the Atlantic City Expressway and the airport. Their executive director, Bart Mueller, is very interested in this, and as we move forward into next year, I think you're going to see some new passion, renewed vigor to getting this done and looking at it and seeing how we can do it. They would have the ability to do it much, much more easily than the Department of Transportation for a host of reasons. Still a very difficult challenge, but something that can be done. Trailers, common sense, again, it would probably be done by executive order during a storm in our legislation. trailers should be forbidden from being on any of these major roadways. They're dangerous, they get whipped around during the rain and the wind, and that's something obviously that should be done by law as well. And we have good public relations plans. We should even have a better one to let people know all the time what they need to do. These are one of these issues that we hopefully don't have to have the storm and have tragedy before we really learn what we need to do. Let me say how proud I am of New Jersey, though, and I know Rich Canis is here, and so many other people. Our county has been proactive, Cape May County. The state of New Jersey has been proactive. We're not Louisiana. FEMA, I believe, has improved, and you're going to hear from them because what happened there was horrific. It's new and it's better and it's different. We're going to be in far better shape than Louisiana was during Katrina. I personally, and this is just my personal perspective, I think we get a B, and I think in life you always have to shoot for an A. I think we can do better, and I think we need to do better, and I think we can do better, and hopefully we will. There's a host of other issues that I could bring up, but I don't think that I will now at this point because I know there's a lot of other speakers. Always welcome the suggestions and ideas on this because, again, as this legislation moves forward, it's a dynamic process. It keeps changing. We keep learning more, and we're welcome to change as well. So please, all of you, especially those that are in the field of emergency, let me know what you think we should do or shouldn't be doing. Freeholder, I thank you for having me here, and I'm welcome to any questions.
Are there any questions for Senator Van Drew this morning?
Vicki Clark, Union County Chamber. Senator, can you give us the specific bill numbers for this legislation you were mentioning?
Yes, we did this two different ways, and I think we still are going to approach it. I'm going to relook at this again because we've got to get this done. The bill number is S2690, and we also have, which I don't have with me, Vicki, but I could get you individual bills. What we did on the Assembly side, really pushing, it's gone a little further on the Assembly side than the Senate side, trying to get this thing done. We created a lot of individual bills. We probably had about 6 individual bills at least. There might have been 8 of them dealing with this. And for those that don't know, we had a task force. We met from Middlesex County to Cumberland County through a good part of a year. We had emergency personnel from all of these areas at all levels, and we went to the Rock as well, state police everywhere, just give us their input, where we were good, where we could do better. The task force then, which was bipartisan, it was Senator Connors from Ocean County, he's a great guy, ranking Republican, and myself, and other people that were, our assembly teams were on it as well. Completely nonpartisan, bipartisan task force, made recommendations. Those recommendations were put forward in a book. And then those recommendations were taken and actually put in the form of legislation. Vicki, that legislation pretty much outlines and puts in legislative form what the recommendations were.
Christine? Yes. Yes.
You were talking about the Linda Steenrod, Cape May, City of Cape May. You were speaking about the sheltering, and I have kind of a double concern here with fewer shelters that would actually be needed. What in the legislation deals with mandatory evacuation? Because if you're mandating that people evacuate, they need to have someplace to go. And does that kind of diminish the ability to do mandatory evacuation? And secondly, in connection with mandatory evacuation, what about the people that refuse and thereby put the lives of the emergency people at risk by distracting them to other things?
They're good questions. Linda, first of all, mandatory evacuation, which is just going to happen, and the governor, most importantly by executive order, is going to make that happen along with the emergency personnel. There is a point, you're right, where there are going to be certain people, at a certain point in the storm, and these ladies and gentlemen will be able to tell you better, you can't leave anymore. You have to have some form of sheltering within the area, including within Cape May County, because there's a point when folks aren't going to be able to get out. For most folks, hopefully they're out earlier, and that's done incrementally. You know, the special needs, and I'm sure Rich will speak on that, special needs folks, you want to get out earlier. Older folks, you want to get out earlier. They've been assembling an inventory of who those folks are. And again, we have, because of fiscal issues, some snafus with that a little bit, I guess. But again, he'll speak about that a little bit more as well. But the way that works is you've got to get out. The people who are most vulnerable must get out first. and then as you go along, everybody else must get out. The lack of sheltering, which is a problem that exists not only in New Jersey, but in many places, still, we're gonna have to make it happen, you know, I mean, because you can't have people stay here, and it is gonna happen, and we're gonna have to do the best with what we have. But in the interim, those areas, again, as I mentioned before, where we are building schools, where we are building new buildings, I just don't nobody can give me a good reason why we're not making sure all those buildings are shelter compatible. That's a common sense issue. As well as another common sense issue, just having an inventory during that emergency evacuation of what you truly are going to need as far as equipment, you know, for power generation, even for our very major facilities. And I'm speaking about nuclear power plants, for generating stations, et cetera. What are they going to need? FEMA can speak to that. One of the problems that happened in Louisiana was not only did we have a breakdown of all this, they didn't really have a proper inventory of the type of equipment that they knew they needed to bring in. We are in much better shape in New Jersey. We have a much better sense of that. Again, we could even do more of it. Bottom line is, when you're told to get out, when it is mandatory, you must get out. If you stay regardless and you're not forced out and they can't get you out, you're there at your own risk, and it can be very dangerous. You know, one other minor thing, we were talking about emergency personnel. One part of this legislation also mandates that we have a plan, a very specific plan for the families of emergency personnel. Because if they're not taken care, they must be, because the emergency personnel are putting their life on the line. They're going to be here, they're staying, their family shouldn't have to go through that. And actually a vulnerability we have is we don't deal with that at all levels as well as we should for all the emergency personnel, something else that has to be done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are you aware
Can you have your
if
name and
the
address, sir?
hurricane bill had struck here, this podium would be underwater?
To answer your question, yes.
Are you aware that there's no safe place to build a shelter at less than a 35-foot altitude, and most of South Jersey has an altitude of 12 feet above high tide?
And, you know, I think you bring up good points, and I think we discussed that in the beginning. I mean, and I don't know how to be more clear about it. If we have a true storm, a Category 3 storm or worse, and we're not going to get the very worst of storms, we don't have the right climate for that. Again, just it's not to be scary, if you see the modeling for this, Cape May County will be underwater. Not just the Barrier Islands, the entire county, pretty much. There are those folks that say maybe a little section of Belle Plaine and Woodbine. Mayor Kikaliski might be just above the water line. I don't know, put his hand up in the air, but everybody else is going to be pretty much out of the area. It's going to be, you know, it's really very serious issue. Again, that's why we said from the very beginning, health, safety, and welfare. I can't stress enough. I hope none of us ever experience this, because it's going to be something like we haven't seen before. That is why having these conferences are important. That's why the legislation is important. That's why the work these gentlemen do is important. That's why it's so important for us to be organized, because when it happens, we should know exactly what we have to do.
Any other questions? If not, we'll thank Senator Van Drew. We may not be able to stay for the length of the conference, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our next speaker is going to talk about state plan for preparedness. Richard Canis, the director of the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. Truly pleased again that you're able to be here today. We want to thank you for your attendance, and looking forward to hear your current 2009 update. Thank you.
You want to?
Sure, if you can, please. Whatever's easier for you.
No,
That's fine.
good here. Thank you, Director Freeholder. I appreciate this, and I sincerely appreciate the invitation. This is my fourth visit to Cape May for this conference, and we were commenting before the conference that I imagine that there are conferences like this taking place all up and down the coast in other counties, but if they are, I'm not aware of them. At least this is the one I get invited to, and I look forward to coming here. I also am concerned that our message needs to get out to the people that aren't here. You at least have taken the time to come because you want answers and you're concerned about this. But you know, there's a whole other group of people out there that are a little bit more perhaps complacent, and that seems to be the operable word.
in our business is to fight complacency, probably as much as we fight anything else. At the state level, we take an approach that is all hazards. And my office is really in two parts. We do the counterterrorism for the state, but we also do the preparedness. And it's in that second category that we spend an inordinate amount of time making sure that all of the state emergency responders, I mean, throughout the state, have the resources and the training that they need. That Jerome's people here can respond anywhere on any hazard. And that's really our responsibility. The second responsibility is to develop a state strategy on these hazards. And we're here specifically to talk about hurricanes and the possibility of hurricanes. And I do agree that we plan for the most serious event, a Cat 3 hurricane in Cape May. But we have to be aware of all of the lesser events that could affect the county as well. A nor'easter here, as has been said, is probably more a risk in our lifetime than a Cat 3, because the Cat 3 really is devastating. I mean, that, I think that's been said several times. It's not that we cannot ignore a warning for a Cat 3. But we do plan for the worst scenario. And the state strategy really focuses on ensuring that we have adequate evacuation, sheltering, and special need plans in the coffers, and that these plans are properly funded. When I first arrived here almost 4 years ago, but the main concern that I saw centered around special needs and getting our hands around it. And what I learned was that by hands we mean money. Everything takes dollars here to organize and to address these special needs people. And I have to thank a lot of people within elected officials and also appointed officials for this effort. We have taken state aid dollars and we've contracted someone to do the studies necessary. And they were started 1.5 years ago to identify all special needs. And we run into other issues like legal issues. We can't force people to register their needs. It has to be voluntary. So that meant a public awareness campaign, and that took a little bit of doing. That's progressing. Anyone who has special needs or that you know might have special needs, we encourage you to have them voluntarily registered. It will help us in our planning immensely. The way we've organized it is we've broken the state up into 4 regions, and the coastal counties are the first to be addressed on special needs, and that's been going on now, as I say, for a year. So we do have the special needs registry. I would venture to say that we're still not to a satisfactory number because, as I say, it is voluntary. But that's where we are. We have put aside state aid dollars for it, so we identified the dollar figure, we've identified the management of it, and how we're going to proceed. And I want to mention it here that the paramount in this is a very vigorous public awareness campaign. And that's why I'm so pleased to be here to see that at least you guys are taking this seriously and solicit your help in convincing other counties to do the same. Without a public awareness campaign, frankly, we're going to fail. As some of the questions have indicated, we're just not sure as a state that we're going to be hit or that we're going to take it seriously. At the state level, we just want to assure you that we do take it seriously and that we do have a plan to do so. This plan needs to be exercised constantly, and that's where Jerome's people come in. They have to work with the county officials, with Frank McCall, with Prosecutor Taylor, with other individuals here who have the authority and the responsibility for reacting at a local level on these exercises. I think we have addressed the reverse lane issue. We've exercised it several times. We'll continue to do that. And if that requires the dollars to do so and to maintain this vigilance, well, then it's my office's responsibility to make sure that you have that. I don't want to brag. I'll leave it to other people here. I'm very pleased that the senator gave us a B, and we are striving for an A. But I know that where we have received an A, and we should get credit for that, is in increasing the grant dollars and state aid dollars that come from the federal government into Cape May. When I arrived here, I remember Bob Taylor coming to my office and stamping on the desk and saying, we're receiving $136,000, Bragg, I think you were there as well, $136,000 paltry dollars is what Cape May was receiving at the time in '06 from the federal government for all of this planning that we're talking about here. I'm pleased to say that in the last 3 years, Cape May has received almost $2 million from the federal government, and we leave it up to the county planners, which I think these two gentlemen chair, that group of the working group, to identify the investment justifications for those dollars. I think we're much better prepared today as a result of those efforts. This county needs to be complimented over and over for its leadership. You have outstanding leaders here, not only from the senator on down, your freeholders. I mean, I deal with freeholders a lot because of the dollar issues. I'm the state's administrative agent for those federal grants. And I can tell you, freeholders are different county to county. Some won't even meet with you. They're not interested in discussing it. And without a strong freeholder support for the county, it's difficult for us at the state level, let alone those people at the federal level, to convince that when the strategy shifts and you're affected in the dollar or the pocketbook, that the freeholders come forward and make up some of those differences because they buy in on the long-term strategy. You're very lucky in that regard here. That you have outstanding leadership, and they cannot be complimented enough. Additionally, some of the other programs that we're working on with the federal government's help is on regional catastrophic planning. And a hurricane is a catastrophic event. And we've received a $5 million grant from the federal government to do this. One of the items that we're looking at is hurricane planning as part of that regional. And while I'm on the subject, the operative word here is regional. When it comes to attracting federal dollars, we cannot work in a unilateral way. And the more we can regionalize, the better and more attractive our investments are to the federal government. So we've gone, at least in my tenure, beyond the county, even though we work regional issues with you. We also at the state level work regional issues with other states. And by partnering with New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, we've attracted regional planning dollars with the federal government. Very important and significant dollars that we're receiving. Transit, which is our #1 security concern in the state, attracted $150 million from the federal government by using this approach. Port security, which is another concern at the state level, attracted a $36 million grant last year. At any given time, I think our office manages somewhere in the vicinity of $300 to $350 million grant dollars for the state. Not excluded is, of course, the southern counties, which have received almost $20 million in the last 3 years for port security, for CAT planning, for critical infrastructure protection, and investments along those lines. I believe that the state has done a tremendous job in this regard. We will strive to do better. And even if we don't, there is a huge effort just to maintain the levels that we have achieved. Already the federal government has told us that for FY10, we should look forward to the same amount of dollars as we received in '09. And why that is significant is because we're in an economic crunch. And to maintain these levels is a huge effort. New Jersey is second only to New York State in the Fed grant dollars that we receive. So I just want to make that known. Critical infrastructure in this particular county, again, by regionalizing, and I should mention, critical infrastructure is one of the measures that are used by the federal government to attract the amount of dollars that come into the area. By doing a regional approach, Cape May, who would say is perhaps infrastructure, critical infrastructure for, is not, because we have the nuclear facilities next door, because we have Atlantic cities, because we have the threats of hurricane. And the last point I want to make to you is to underline what the senator said about if we tell you to evacuate, please do so. We will try to front-end load the notice as much as we can. We'll try to fight the complacency. But I've talked to Governor Byrne, who was the last governor to order an evacuation because of potential threat in 1985. And he told me that he had to order people to be forcibly removed from the house. It was one of the hardest things he did. So we've studied the lessons learned from that drill. I can only assure you that on my tenure, this will not be done unless we feel it's absolutely necessary. But we will be doing, if we see something getting close within the 2-day window that we'll probably have, because we run exercises, and the window is really only about half a day before the governor is convinced that he has to mandate the evacuation. That doesn't give us much time, but we can front-end load the effort 2 days ahead of time by asking for volunteer evacuations. And when we do that, and we're not going to do it unless we feel it's absolutely necessary, we implore you to heed that.